kick off, and it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Kevin Brown, who is on the board, we call it, of the Friends of Jamaica National Railway, and Paul, who's here as well, is, we've got others? Yeah. Yes. So it's, and that board, the Friends of Jamaica National Railways are trying to get the thing working, get railway working and stations restored, and Kevin also will talk all about that. Kevin's background, he was an academic at the University of Nottingham. He's worked, advised on, been seconded on Bombardier and on the railway, and Network Rail. So railways are in his blood, I think, and he's certainly been lured into this venture and is an absolutely key player, and has been out sort of softening the ground out in Jamaica and making sure that we've got our contacts all lined up. And he's going to talk to us today about the history of the railways and where they're going. And another thing just to add is that Brent, Alex and I were out in Jamaica in February, and we scanned the railway station in Kingston, and that we're hoping to turn into drawings, and that can become a live project with possibly a museum there. But I don't think I want to steal Kevin's thunder, and so I will probably, you're ready, Kevin?
I am indeed, if I can bundle over these wires.
Oh, it's just a... Okay, ready to go. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Mic check. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I probably don't need a mic, but I'll use it anyway, just to make sure you're able to hear me clearly. I'm sure my accent is okay, so you guys should be able to follow along. So tonight I want to talk to you about Jamaica, and specifically I want to focus on the railway industry. And oftentimes when we hear about Jamaica, we don't link the two, right? Railways and Jamaica. Maybe reggae music, jerk chicken, athletes, cricket, but not railways. So I hope this will be a bit more nuanced and interesting for you, because Jamaica does have a railway network, and I'll be talking about the history of that network and also the plans that we have to revive it, which I guess gives you a clue that it's not perhaps in the best state. So I'm part of a group called the Friends of the Jamaica National Railway, and we have some colleagues here, Paul Case and others, who are part of a committee. And what we are essentially a voluntary group of people who would like to support the revival of railway in Jamaica. We want to not just revive the railways, but also promote more education and sort of preserve the history of the railway in the country, because actually there is a rich history, a hidden history, I would argue, that we need to tell. We also want to support the government in a range of railway projects, and some of them I will speak about today as well. So we're a voluntary group, and if anyone here likes what they hear today, you can join, right? It's an open organization. There's no educational credentials required. You don't have to matriculate into the organization. You don't even have to know anything about the railway. As long as you're interested and you're a friend of Jamaica, or even better, a Jamaican, then you are more than welcome. So we are currently trying to get registered, because we're realizing that there are opportunities to perhaps draw down some grant funding to do some of the work that we want to do. And also when we interact with private sector supporters, it's better if we are registered. So we're trying to get that organized rather than just being a loose bunch of enthusiasts. But I wanted to set some context. I know because of this organization, you know the history of Jamaica, so I won't retell that narrative. But of course, as you know, Jamaica, a very small island, was colonized by the Brits for pretty much 400 years, from 1655 to 1962. Initially, the Spanish were the first ones to, we don't use the word discover because Jamaica had people there before, but the Spanish were the first ones to visit the country. They met a population of Tainos, as they were called at the time. They spoke a language called the Arawak language. And those Tainos did not survive the Spanish. They were pretty much wiped out. And by the time the English got there in 1655, they decided to change the country into a plantation economy built around taking African slaves and using them as labor for sugar plantations and tobacco, right? But what's often not known is that at some point in that history, they introduced the railway. And so shortly after we had railway in the UK, Canada, and United States, Jamaica also introduced its own network in between 1843 to 1845. So we've had railway perhaps a lot earlier than some countries, if you look at railway history, because essentially, roughly 20 years after we had the railway in the UK, Jamaica introduced a small service, only 14 miles long, but nonetheless, you know, they were able to have a steam train run for 14 miles. It was called the Projector, and these are some pictures, not so clear, that shows you images of the stations and viaducts and so on that they built. So we are one of the early adopters of railway, and as I said, it's a hidden history because it's not something that is spoken about a lot when you talk about Jamaica, but it's certainly something significant for me, and you know, I keep telling anyone who will listen. So we had a continuous railway service for some time, from the launch in 1845 to the early 1990s, and in fact you'll be happy to know we moved away from steam technology at some point, and we adopted diesel trains. And you can see an image here of a diesel train on a Jamaican line. But unfortunately, you know, even as we can see today with the railway in this country, it's a very capital-intensive industry. Oftentimes has to be subsidized by governments, typically. And so, under the strain of debt, lots of debt, they decided to close the service, or at least most of it was closed, sadly. And it remains so until today, you know. So I put there our little project, which I'll speak about. Hopefully that will be a revival point, right? But there are also other little activities going on. So the bauxite industry uses the railways still, and the government, when they feel politically motivated, introduce projects such as the school train, which I will also tell you about as well. So, would you imagine that Jamaica is covered by railway lines? So that's the island. We're a small country. In fact, it's 150 miles long in a straight line and 50 miles wide. Tiny. You know, if you were to drive from Montego Bay to the south coast here, it's a bit windy, so it'll take you a bit of a while. But you know, in about an hour, you've covered the island from north to south. So it's a very small country, and it's covered with railways from east to west, right? Most visitors don't even realize this because, of course, it's not in operation, and most Jamaicans know it's there, but you know, it's peripheral to everything else because they don't see the trains running. You know, so they know it's there. They might have to drive over the lines that are still on the road, but I think very few Jamaicans know the coverage of the railway in terms of how many parts of Jamaica you could go on the train. And you can imagine, if you've been to Jamaica, it's a very mountainous country, so any train service that you would take would end up being quite scenic, because the minute you leave the cities, you are pretty much in rural Jamaica. So you know, it would have been quite a nice ride, I'd imagine, to take trains. So we have a significant network. The challenge now is, how do you restore that network? I like showing people that we actually did have trains, just in case you've listened to me and said, nah, it's not true. So I do have a video that I will go to if it plays. Let's hope it does. Right, so I need to drag it across there. Just give me a second. Worth waiting for, so just bear with me. Take my mouse over there. So this is from the Jamaica Library Service. They have an archive, and this is actual footage of the trains running in Jamaica. I won't play all of it, just about 2 minutes, just to show you what it looked like when the whole network was up and running, because it is quite fascinating to see. So this is from the Kingston terminus. I don't know if any of you have been to that Kingston terminus. It's a very iconic train station building, by the way. And you can see taking the train to these Jamaicans is quite normal. They are queuing up for tickets, right? And the train is coming in, right? I don't think they allow porters to stand outside trains anymore, do they? You'll notice some interesting things, by the way. So you've seen a porter stand outside a train. There's more interesting quirks there to come. So this is the train arriving on the platform, and I'll just let it run a bit more. So I think this is like the 60s, and it's interesting, the hairdos and that the women and how the women are dressed in Jamaica. It seems everyone's here is very pressed those days, right? You'll know what I'm talking about, right? Very straight. And then the porters, so you can see women carrying stuff from rural Jamaica. So this could be produce, farm produce that they're taking to be sold in the markets, because the trains cover the rural areas as well, coming into the corporate area. So quite active, right? There's a porter fully decked out. Now remember, Jamaica is very hot, right? And this guy is dressed like he's in England, such as the British influence, even has a tie on. Neatly dressed, helping to move goods into cars as a porter. This is a ticket collector, it looks like. And these are people now in the train waiting for it to move off, and it now pulls out. So this could be this could be any train station in the UK now. But unfortunately, that's back in the 60s. Well, okay, maybe not the goats, right? You wouldn't see goats in an English train station, so that's unique, right? And off the train goes, right? And the trains didn't just carry passengers, they also carried cars. And I don't know, for you car historians, you can probably tell me what type of car that is, right? All right, there you go. So, so I'll stop it there. But you can see that, as I said, that could have been any train station in the UK today. That hustle and bustle is what I'm about, is what I have dealt with to get here from Nottingham. And that used to be Jamaica, believe it or not. Well, I've shown you the video footage, so I'm sure you believe it now. So let's go back to the presentation. Okay. So that's, if you ask me what motivates me and my group of volunteers, it's what you've just seen there. Where I've shown you what used to be a reality in Jamaica, still a reality in Britain, and of course you've modernized your infrastructure year on year. But unfortunately, in the 1990s, we stopped, right? And we're going to see if we can get back there. So this is what we have now. And I'm showing you perhaps the worst of it. Not all of it has deteriorated this badly, but you can see that, even the carriages that perhaps in the video that I showed you was actively taking passengers is now parked up and full, properly rusted out and covered with, not even sure what that bush is, but it's, it's growing on it. And you can see this locomotive is completely in a bad shape, and so on and so forth. This would be a cargo carriage back then, and so on. So the infrastructure has depreciated significantly, right? There's no two ways about it. But could there be an opportunity, right? When we talk about reviving Jamaica's railway today, right? Could there be an opportunity to bring back rail by tapping into one of Jamaica's success stories, which is tourism? So what you saw earlier was people, were people using the train, passengers using the train, and also the trains being used to carry freight, cars, for example. But could we revitalize our train system around the tourism product? And why do I mention tourism? Because Jamaica is pretty good at it, actually. And these are the most recent numbers. So between January this year and May, right? This year, January and May, we received 1.5 million visitors. Million, right? So we're really good at tourism, like really good at it. And we earn a lot of money from it. I'm not saying that money stays in the country, but we earn all the money from it, right? And when you look at the spending power for tourists, this is old data, 2018, they spend on average $681, right? Each tourist arriving in the country. So I'm sure we could take a small portion of that and give you a nice train ride in Jamaica. And that's the idea. It's not complicated. It's tapping into something that's already going really well for Jamaica, but it's not offered. When you come to Jamaica, well, perhaps not you, but certainly a lot of people, it's for sunshine, sea, and sand. That's what they've prescribed. That's what they've told the travel agent they want. And typically we give it to them and they keep coming back. But these days, most travelers are becoming a bit more nuanced and they want more than just the average sunshine holiday. And I think something like the railway might be novel enough to pique their interest. So this graphic sort of shows the idea. We're talking about a rural community tourism railway, and we've stated their community because we want to bring back the railway, but this time not just as a corporate initiative, but something that the communities that live along the line can benefit from. So that's pretty important. And you know, we want to ensure that there's economic benefit. Tourism earns us a lot of money in the billions, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of it doesn't stay in the country because the tourism infrastructure typically is foreign owned. So, you know, you pay for your tickets here in the UK, you pay for your holidays actually in the UK, and then you go on holiday in Jamaica, right? So, so in terms of money spent, we don't get all of it, but we want to try and ensure that the microeconomies around the lines benefit by creating jobs, by creating business opportunities. It's an opportunity also for renewal of communities. So for example, we have these train stations dotted along the network. Could they now become educational centers, community centers? Could we repurpose these train stations that we have? And so on. So we have a few partners that we've actually launched a project, and we've actually submitted our first grant bid through the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, which has been given a pot of money by the World Bank for community tourism. So we're not the only ones bidding for this, but we're the only ones with a railway project for community tourism. So we have a few partners, including, of course, the Jamaica Railway Corporation, who are a government agency responsible for the network. And then we have the National Road Safety Council, who are partnering with us a lot. And of course, we're there as Friends of Jamaica National Rail, and we're also working with the University of Technology in Kingston. So let's see, hopefully it will be successful and we can get going. But so let me introduce you to what we're trying to do, right? The first step on the way is location, right? Jamaica is beautiful all around, but we wanted to pick somewhere that we were sure people would have a pleasant experience. So we're focusing on what's called a Bog Walk Gorge. And it's a fascinating history, by the way, because the Bog Walk is a bastardization of the Spanish name of the place. I won't even attempt to pronounce the Spanish version, but the English bastardized it and it's called Bog Walk. But Google it and see, because remember, Jamaica was colonized by the Spanish first, and they went around naming places, right? Colonizers tend to like to do that. So they gave this place their Spanish name, and the English gave it their English version. It's Bog Walk today. But what's interesting is that Hugh Barnett Cave in 1961 had this to say. You know, I am not a geologist, but to me, Bog Walk Gorge is the most awesome thing in Jamaica. Now, if that doesn't sell it to you, nothing else will. And although it doesn't look quite like this, the natural surrounding still remains the same from this painting. But this is a proper road. This is a proper bridge now. Still low as this, but not like that. And you know, the roads are paved and all the rest of it. So, but still awesome. So. What does it look like? So of this significant network that I've shown you, we've just picked a small bit. So from here, Spanish Town, which again, Spanish, right? So this is that was their capital when they were on the island in the 15th century. And so the train line runs all the way up to a place called Linstead. So that's what we're targeting for community tourism. 13 miles, so 26 miles round trip of scenic Jamaica. I'll show you a bit of it in a minute, including tunnels. At least 2 tunnels you get to go through on that ride. So there you go. So the line is actually in use. This is the positive thing. That part of the network is active. And just to show you how broken up this railway network is, right? You can get from Spanish Town to Linstead, but you can't get from Spanish Town to Kingston, which is the capital, because the infrastructure is so bad there that the trains can't run. So just to give you a digress a bit, so when they want to take trains, like when they repair them and take them off the line, they have to literally mount them on articulated trucks and drive them to their main, because the main yard is still in Kingston, so they have to drive them into on the main road. Ironically for trains, right? Drive them into the main, because you can't take trains in here. So it just shows you how the line is a huge network, but there are challenges there. Anyway, they are using that bit of the line. If the school train runs on that line, right, and these little children enjoy taking the train. One thing that perhaps they didn't see coming is the level of vandalism. These students, they write on the seats, they poke the seats, they cut the seats, they all sorts. So it's a challenge. But the school train is still running, and that's happening. The bauxite trains have never stopped running, right? So they still use the line, not just that section, but even beyond that as well. Okay, so I'm sure you want to see the line, right? Because I went on a ride, so you're gonna travel with me now. I went on a ride, so let's take a ride on this line, because I told you it's active. And when I went there, they arranged a sort of VIP-ish tour. So myself, the Minister for Tourism, and a whole bunch of other government big heads, as we call it, took the train to sort of see, okay, is this thing really feasible? So I was lucky enough to be on that little tour. So let's go. All right, so the first thing to say is that this was my first ever time taking a train in Jamaica. This is after being in the UK for 23 years and taking a train on a very regular basis in this country, right? And even in Europe. And even as far as Japan, where I went into the high-speed train. Never took the train in my own country until this year. This is like this year, right? So recent. So you can imagine, I'm being calm here, but inside I was so excited, right? And this is the train that I took, right? So looks good, right? On the outside. Okay, so let's keep going. So that's the loco that pulled it, right? Alstom, big boy. So this is an Alstom locomotive, I believe. An old one, right? An old one, right? Because he works for Alstom, so I'm teasing him. So we have these trains that still run. We somehow keep them running. You have to apply a bit of CPR every now and then, but they do run. They do run. Okay, so this is the train in action. So we're on the platform and waiting for this train, and the driver decides to back it up in, and you can look at the name there, the Clarendon Express. And they don't decorate trains like that in England, do they? Right? You guys are a bit boring. But we like colors, so we're like this yellow and green all over and all the rest of it, right? So that's the train, right? So you can see the potential for park and ride. You can see the cars there, right? So we're talking about the park and ride, and then you take the train. Okay. So let's go.
Station there.
This is the Spanish Town station.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so you're asking me which station?
Yes.
Yeah, Spanish Town. Yeah. So the station. Sorry, I don't even know. The station is on this side. You can't see it, but this is the platform, and then there's a station building right behind it. Yeah. Right. Okay. So for this, because I told you it was an organized tour, we had a few VIPs. So we had a tour guide as well. This guy's worked on the network for some time now, and he gave us a tour, or tried to give us a tour. It was in patches, but nonetheless, he was the tour guide. Okay. Now, as you go along the line, there's quite a bit that you see, and some of it might be of interest to you, some of it might not. But anyway, I picked out a couple of things, so here we go. This is not a very good picture of G.T. Foster College, but it is a college in Jamaica that trains typically teachers for physical education. So that's its specialty. You go there, you get trained in physical education. It used to have one of Jamaica's only Olympic-sized swimming pools, but somehow there's no water in the pool. So, but nonetheless, it was built by the Cubans. That's the other historical thing about it as well. Balboa Gorge. So this picture is me from the train. So this is what you would actually see from the train. So we are pretty much on a precipice. Don't look down, right? Because it literally is a cliff edge. The train is there, and right next to you is like soup. Right? But the scenery is to die for. So this is a river, Rio Cobra. It's called Rio Cobra. Again, the Spanish named it first, and the English bastardized it. So I'm giving it the English name, which is the Rio Cobra River, and that flows all year round, right? It has some, the problem it has is that because of pollution from the bauxite mining, you can see there's a lot of green stuff growing inside there and so on. We do have issues there with bauxite pollution from time to time. And I can't remember if we were exiting a tunnel or entering one, but you can see that there's an entrance of a tunnel right there, right? So you do get a tunnel experience as well. Goes right through this big rock. However long. But when you come out, you get this scenery, like wow, right? And then there's a road just there as well, so right. So this is more of it, right? As you go along there, and the train is at some parts drives slow enough for you to take detailed photos like this one. So this is still the gorge there, and so on. So quite scenic, and you're literally right next to it. And then you move away from the gorge. So if you went to Google Maps and looked at the line, it meanders to the gorge and then away from it. And don't ask me why they did it like that. I'm sure the engineers have good excuses for that. So you kind of move away from it at times, and then you get mountains, right? You make it very mountainous. So you do get this mountainous scenery as well in the background. And then you get to Linstead. So if you missed it, we traveled from Spanish Town, right? Saw some scenic stuff. And then you get to Linstead. So Linstead is now where you stop. And the idea here is that you stop there, probably like a craft market or something where you could buy Jamaican trinkets, souvenirs, and so on, and maybe food. That's how we would allow the local economy now to benefit, right? You'd stop the train, let everyone off, they have a meander around. We'd probably repurpose the building to either become a museum or something they could walk around and see the history of it. Because at the moment it's just there, not being used. And then I included this picture because the bauxite industry is very active on the line, and this is one of their trains, right? And you can see. So I just thought I'd put that in there because sometimes you have to overlap with them and the passenger trains. So that's just another picture of the bauxite line. And by the way, the carriages, it's long, it's very long lines. So yeah, it's quite a significant operation by the bauxite companies. Oh, there's a video. Let's see. So this just shows the bauxite line. So what happened was that we arrived, because Jamaica is only one line, by the way. So what they do, they have little passing sections. So we parked up, and this guy decided to let it, while we were there. So he decided to, because it's one line, so they just have to figure it out. And as I said, it's a long train, a very long train. So that's happening 24/7. The bauxite guys use it intensively, right? Because they're taking all the bauxite to the port to some other country that want it. I put this in there as well because what we're looking at is sustainability. So when we're saying that the best chance that this line stands in terms of economic viability is to make it multi-purpose. So it's one line, but how many things can we do on the line? So you saw the bauxite train, you saw the tourist line, which hopefully some of you will use in the future. But we're also, the Jamaica Railway Corporation is also in conversations with the industrial sector who are dotted along the line as well. So we have a BPO, a business processing operation here, pretty much a call center, right? And they have up to 500 staff at the moment, and they want to grow to 4,000. And so for them, you can imagine when they get into the 4,000 numbers, the traffic, to get to that site is going to be significant. So what they've agreed is that they will build a station right outside there. So where I am, so imagine all the pictures I'm showing you, by the way, is me in the train. So this is how close I am to the train, to this building. So they want to build a train station that stops there, and then Spanish Town becomes a park and ride. So for workers, they park up, take the train to work, go to work, take the train back to Spanish Town, off you go in your car or the bus. So the company has agreed to pay for the station. They're going to build it from their own money, right? This links to the line that I'm currently on, and so that's also being planned as well. So and I thought it's important to show you that if the line is going to be sustainable, we've got to put it to use. We've got to find as many uses for it as possible. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is the Kingston terminus. So this is an interesting one because you can't get to the Kingston terminus by train. But we're going to talk about it nonetheless because it's an iconic train station, right? Built in the 19th century, and Peregrine can tell you more about it than I can. He's the specialist in terms of conservation. But we want to reuse the building, one for running trains, but beyond trains also for tourism, again as a museum. So the trains that are not in use are currently parked up. So this is a real picture. This is what the terminus actually looks like. You can see the trains are parked up. It's an old steam train, and it's an old diesel locomotive. You can literally, if any one of you rocked up to the station tomorrow and asked politely, you could be allowed to just wander around just like these people. It's not structured, right? So you literally have to just walk around and figure it out. And what we want to do is make it more structured, make it a proper museum. You walk in, you might get a guided tour, or if you don't get a guided tour, at least there are signs and information boards there for you, right? Because it's quite interesting. It's frozen in time, literally. So it's quite a good experience. So we want to rehabilitate that space and make it into a museum, and hopefully that becomes another attraction. So what would it look like? So at the bottom, this is what you have now, and at the top is the artistic impression of what it could be in the future, right? So you can see at the moment you've got the trains parked up. Here, it's built out a bit more in terms of shoring up the infrastructure, making it safe and more easily accessible. And you can see people now walking around the trains, right, parked up, and it's a bit more contemporary in certain aspects in terms of the reception area and so on, right? But that's the future. And outside gets a bit of a spruce up as well, right? So this is what it looks like at the moment, right? And then the plan is to sort of, do some landscaping, repair the roofs of these buildings, and also do an addition here that becomes like an education center and museum as well. So the community again can use it. It's a community. Keep repeating that word. We want the trains to be for everyone, so we want to make sure the community gets some agency there, right? So you might be thinking, okay, great, sounds good. Does he really have a plan? We do actually, and it's in multiple stages, right? And so we're currently getting a team together. I would say we have a team in the form of our Friends of Jamaica National Railway, but that team, we need to continue building that team and also identifying, well, what exactly we're trying to achieve, what are their requirements, and Jamaica needs to tell us their requirements for sure. And as I've said, we've now submitted a proposal, so if we get that funding, we are up and running in terms of stage one, right? And then we've refurbished the trains and the tracks and everything else to get us to stage 3, which is to open the line to tourists, right? To some of you in the future. And we're hoping that by 2024 we can achieve that. So next time you speak to me, you'd have said, oh, I went on your tourism line and it was fantastic. And then beyond that, we want to open the museum. Right now, for 2023-24, we're talking perhaps about a small museum to start with, because there is space in the station right now that was used recently, for example, for an art exhibition. So that space could be used. But in the long term, we want to make it a proper museum, right? Use up the whole space. So we're thinking that's going to be pretty long term, right? From 2025 onwards. And then finally, 2027 onwards, we want to get to Kingston. We really want to get trains to Kingston, right? It's a real shame you can't get trains to Kingston. So we're hoping that by 2027 we'll have convinced some investor, maybe one of you, to help us repair the line. We do have some support, right? And Neil Howard, who is a white British gentleman who fell in love with the railways in Jamaica. He's really the brainchild of what I've been discussing today, because he has a strong belief that we really need to bring back the railway in Jamaica. So he's been really good at talking to partners and bringing on some sponsors to support the initiative as well. So we have a cadre of supporters, but feel free to join the list, right? So we need you, right? And as I said, it's an open call to anyone who might be interested in the railways. You don't have to be a railway engineer or manager. And yeah, that's it. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was terrific. And of course, one wants to know more. One other thing that I was going to ask you about is the idea that the Montego Bay to Appleton might be on the cards. Can I talk about that?
I can, yeah.
I'm not sure anyone heard that question, but hopefully.
Yeah, that was what I wanted to ask you actually. What had happened to that bit of railway, because it wasn't mentioned.
Oh, okay.
Which
right.
bit? Mobe to where?
Maybe
Appleton.
Oh, right.
It was a very
okay.
popular tour.
Okay. Oh, God.
Yeah, so we won't surprise you to know that we have a rum estate in Jamaica, right? Surprise. So we have a Appleton estate. They make Appleton estate rum, amongst others. So there was a train line that you could actually take from. I believe you could take it from Montego Bay. Certainly you could take it from a place called Mount Pele, which is right here, and you could take the train down south to Appleton estate here, drink a bit of rum, and then go back to Mount Pele. And typically, if you took a cruise ship, this would be a fantastic day out, right? So the cruise ships would dock up here, and you take your trip. It closed, but now there is a desire to reopen it, and there are private investors who are really keen. But we are facing some challenges, right, that I'll share with you. So having left the line vacant for a few years, if you're familiar with Jamaica, if someone sees land and it looks unused, they might just, make use of it, put it that way. So we have a lot of squatting on the line or near the line. And that's a challenge right now. So, never mind the need to repair sections of the line. First, you need to get access to it. And then secondly, you need to make sure it's safe, right? Because you need to make sure people are some distance away from the line. So that's a big challenge right now. And there is not much political appetite to start moving people off the land, even though they are squatting. So they are looking at how do we do this? Do we move the line and build a line around them? So you move the line and go around the people who built illegal settlements there, or or do you just identify properties that you could perhaps purchase even though they haven't bought it, you know, and claim at the land? So they haven't figured it out yet. There's no answer to that, but it's something government is keen on because, as I said, there is a private investor who wants to do it, but we need to access the line first.
I'm pretty sure that incidentally the Dean, Siva, who organises things at the High Commission, that she as a child, I think she said she had been on that line.
Yeah, there are quite a few Jamaicans when I talk about the project who said to me that they've travelled on the train, you know, so, okay, there you go, even Rosie as well, so.
You went on it?
Kingston to Mobay, the year before it closed, the whole way.
Right, so she travelled from here all the way up to here.
How long did that take?
Some hours, and it was exhausting, very exhausting, but it was incredibly scenic, incredible,
Scenic, yeah.
incredible,
Yeah, very scenic.
yeah.
Very scenic.
But it was wood seats, or anyway,
How long ago
hard
was
seats.
that?
It was just the year before it closed, I can't remember.
92.
91.
Must have been, yeah, I was out there Christmas of 91, 92, so maybe
Yeah.
it was then,
Yes, because after that it closed.
yeah.
And when did the Montego Bay to Appleton close?
Good question, I don't know the latest date for that closure.
About 20 years
But
ago.
a few years,
About
a good few
20
years.
years ago?
I don't know.
So people have
Yeah.
built these settlements.
It's really government
within
People have built these
settlements.
settlements, yeah, they
So they
do.
must be quite
These-
established.
Unfortunately, yes, because it's interesting. So I spent half my life in Jamaica. I grew up there. So the historical backdrop to this, again, you could say that the Brits' fault, right? So
We've got an awful lot to do.
the problem is that when Jamaica was colonized, even though the Africans that you take into the country as slaves were the majority, they owned no land. So when you gave them emancipation, you still didn't give them land. And so Jamaica has grappled with land since then, right? Because no government has sort of launched a redistribution policy per se, right? And what happened was that once the now ex-slaves had their freedom, the only land that they were allowed to utilize were like very mountainous on hillsides. I mean, if I showed you where my grandparents lived and my great-great-grandparents lived, you know, you'd be like, wow, you know, because literally on a mountainside, you know. But that was the only land because the whites who were still in the country occupied all the best lands right up until 1962 when some of them left and so on. And even Montego Bay, the government, which is our second city, they had to buy back the land of the Barnetts, right, who owned the plantation in that era. So Jamaica's history is very much colored by the plantation economy. So there is a land issue. And so over the years, people have just, you know, seconded land, shall we say? Is that a nicer word to do? You know, people just taking land where they can, right? There's been a squatting problem from when I was a child, it continues. And yes, if you leave railway land alone, people were like, well, that's a nice piece of land, I'll build something on it. So, yeah, that's a problem, that's a problem. And sometimes people get moved on, but you can imagine the political fallout, right? So, it's tricky.
Thanks very much. Any other questions?
Well, it's not a question. I have some very recent photographs taken in the area of Ipswich, Catatupa, and Cambridge. And they're here on my phone, but I can't share them with you any other way. So if anyone's interested in seeing what's left of that line, and some of the stations along the way, they're here. So I'll make them available.
Great.
Well, certainly afterwards, we could share with Peregrine and we can
From
there.
here.
We can perhaps share.
We are trying to collate as much as possible. So you know, any background information you have would be great.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
How long is the ride from Spanish Town to Lindsay?
Right. So how long is the ride from Spanish Town to here? Oh, I didn't time it, but I think it took us about half an hour. Yeah. So I think round trip would be an hour. The train isn't very fast, although I think they were pushing it, the Jamaican drivers. And the signaling is quite rudimentary. So the signaling is pretty much, he either blows his horn really loud, and the signaler then hears it and shuts the, because there are a few road crossings, by the way. Or they call a mobile phone and cause the signal to say I'm coming, and they'll close the line.
You wouldn't want to run into a Vauxhall train.
No, so yeah, well, you saw them, right? They're beasts, right? So the so it's about half an hour, yeah, about half an hour, yeah. But quite scenic, so it just goes by very quickly.
Andrew, did you?
Yeah. A statement that there was a book published about Jamaican railways, and I can't remember its author, but it's basically a collection of photographs with some fairly brief text, but it has a whole load of historic photographs in it.
Oh, okay.
So it's stupid of me not to have thought it would be.
But you've got it.
Sorry?
You've got it. You've
I've
got
got a
it.
copy of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Was it
wow.
James Halstead?
Sorry?
Was it James Halstead? That's good.
Could well be. Yeah. The other thing is, the line from Spanish Town to Kingston.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that when the road was built, there was some kind of devilish agreement that the government wouldn't put money into the railways to undercut the toll earnings from the road? Is that right? Or is that rumour?
Well, probably a bit of both, right? In Jamaica, they say that the truth is in between it. Well, we would say that you never see smoke without fire. So yeah, there might be something there. I've heard that many times, and what I would say is that over the years we've not seen a great amount of enthusiasm by the government to rehabilitate the railway. There has been talk that there's a desire not to allow the railway, especially for freight, to compete with the road carrying trucks.
Yeah.
So yes, there is some politics there that has been mentioned in the past. This current administration, the minister, well, the former minister, because they changed the minister recently, he was very enthusiastic about it. So if we get investors, they would consider rehabilitating the line. I think tourists, of course, I think that's more palatable. We're not competing with for passenger transport or freight. We're just carrying tourists. I think that's why we're focusing on that.
So you're not at this stage trying to generate any commuting traffic, because you know the traffic from Spanish Town through ferry into
It's awful, right?
It's absolute hell.
Yeah.
If you had a train, you could at least relieve it.
Yes, and so what is required right now is what is required right now is a master plan which they're working on, because you're right in here the corporate area is very congested, right? And so if we could launch trains from Spanish Town to Kingston and vice versa, could it be a solution to congestion?